Guru Nation, welcome to episode 125 of Random Musings from the Clinical Trials Guru. Welcome to everyone from YouTube who's watching as well. I've been gone for a week, and that's because it's been an incredibly busy week, even for my standards. I had an incubator thing at a local university here for 2 days. I had an all-day monitoring visit as an independent contractor. I had 2 pre-audit visits for one of my clients. Next week, I'm going to New York for my CRO project. But we'll bring you videos from there. I'm bringing the camera with me. But this week, we're gonna make up for it. And when I say we, I mean me and my videographer. We're gonna and my guests. I'm interviewing a lot of guests this week. Hopefully, knock on wood. There's a couple that are for sure penciled in. So our webinar. We're gonna have a webinar March 27th, 2018. It's going to be, and I don't know what the title is going to be yet. I'm going to come up with something catchy. But it's basically how to juggle all the moving pieces of a study. Like from before you get the study, how do you get it? What kind of personnel do you need to get it? Then site selection visit. Then negotiating your contract and budget. Then doing the startup regulatory. Then doing the site initiation visit. Then creating your source documents. And in between all that stuff, there's all the trainings that you need. So that's going to be the webinar topic for March. And we're actually going to have slides, and I'll be able to present it better. But in this video and podcast, I'm just going to give an overview of the stuff that we're going to cover. And then I have another video later that's going to be more of a bird's eye view of clinical research. Like, this is for all the newbies in the industry. How do the sponsors, CROs, sites, FDA, IRBs, PIs, CRAs, how do they all connect and how do they all work together? Which could be part of this one, but I want to kind of keep them separate. This one's more for the sites. So let's get right into it in episode 125, study process. So the first thing you need, and this is for the research sites, okay? So if you're a research clinic, the first thing you need, assuming you have a PI and you have a location and you have a study coordinator, or maybe not a study coordinator, maybe you're the study coordinator. The first thing you need is the study. Okay, you can't have a business, you can't generate revenue in clinical research unless you get a study. So the first thing you got to do is do business development. Okay, and I'm going to actually write these things down because we're going to have Amy create these slides, and I'm going to send her this video so that we can talk, so that she can create the slides. So let me find a piece of paper and start writing. So the study process, biz dev, okay, and by the way, this is where I'll put my plug. We do this for clients. We're gaining like 2 or 3 clients a week now. $1,000 a month. We do the biz dev for you. Not only the biz dev, we do everything I'm about to talk about, the entire study process for you. We help you with everything. Okay, so for the webinar, March 27th, mark your calendars right now, Guru Nation. The study process. Understand the study process. We'll come up with a catchy title. So the first thing is biz dev. Okay, you've got to get studies. Without study, you can't generate revenue. So get the studies first. Okay, how do you do that? Well, you can hire someone like us to do it for you. We have a few competitors. They charge about double, and they do about half as much as we do. But there's people out there that can get you studies, or you can get studies yourself for free, or a combination of both. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with you hiring someone like us. We use our infrastructure. We're pretty affordable, and then you can still do your own biz dev. It doesn't hurt to do double the biz dev, especially early on. Even in a busy year like this year, 2018 is busy, but it's still not necessarily easy for new sites to get studies. So biz dev, how do you do it? You go to clinicaltrials.gov. We've done entire webinars on how to get studies, so I'm not going to go through it in great detail this time, but you go on clinicaltrials.gov, you sign up on all the CRO databases, there's drugdev.gov, .org, I think. They've merged, or Quintiles bought them recently. ClinicalTrials.gov is the best way. So you go on there, you look for indications, you look for open studies, and you start emailing, you start calling, you start networking with the project managers, study directors, people that are looking for sites. And it's a numbers game. So if you reach out to 100, okay, probably you're going to hear back from 10 of them. Probably you'll get about 7 CDAs, maybe 5. Probably from that you'll get like 3 or 4 feasibility surveys, and probably from that you'll get 1 or 2 site selection visits. Okay, so I know that's a lot. I just mentioned a lot, so let's go in order. You do your outbound marketing, your biz dev. You go on clinicaltrials.gov. The next thing you want to do is get a CDA. That's a confidentiality disclosure agreement. Sometimes they're called NDAs, non-disclosure agreement. It's basically the sponsor or the CRO sending you a document that you need to sign, letting them know that they're about to send you confidential information about a study. And obviously you shouldn't share specifics about the study with anyone else. Okay. Now, that doesn't mean you can't send the study lead to a colleague. Let's say you own a clinic in New Jersey and you have a colleague in Arkansas and you guys share leads. You don't need to, just because you sign the CDA does not mean you can't share that contact with that person. You just can't share the synopsis. You can't share the protocol, but you could let them know, hey, so-and-so is running an asthma study. Here's their email. You can do that. You can't send them a synopsis. Okay. You could send them the clinicaltrials.gov link and say this person's running this study and looking for sites. You can do that. So, a lot of people are worried about, well, what is the CDA? The CDA is really, you can't talk about this one sponsor's study to another sponsor for obvious reasons, right? They're competitors. So that's the CDA. Once you get the CDA and check your emails, okay? Like, they're going to send you these CDAs in your inboxes. I had a client who was really bad at checking their emails, and then they were surprised why they were getting passed up on studies. And the reason is, when they send you a CDA, you can't take 3 months to return it. It's got to be 3 days, all right? Because especially if they're actively looking for sites, they're not going to wait around for you. So CDA triggers a feasibility survey. Okay. Now, we do these for you as well if you're a client, but basically they're going to get information about your site's capabilities, your investigator experience, your coordinator experience, your patient database numbers, your previous studies, like everything that you think they're going to ask, they will in these feasibility surveys. Really what they're trying to assess is your patient recruitment capabilities, so your database, and your experience. So if you have both, great. If you only have one but not the other, really try to highlight that in these feasibility surveys. That's why I recommend, if you're a client of ours, I highly recommend you let us do your first couple of surveys for you, and we're going to get the information from you. We have someone reach out to you and get your info from you so that we know how to handle your feasibility surveys, because we know what sponsors and CROs want to see on the surveys, and we need to make sure that we're highlighting the right components of your capabilities, right? Like, you want to lead with your strengths and not your weaknesses. And there are various ways feasibility surveys look different depending on the sponsors and CROs, but at the end of the day, they're looking for 2 things: your experience and your patient enrollment, your patient database. And again, if you have both, fantastic. If you only have one, that's still okay. If you have none, we got some work to do. So that's feasibility surveys, okay? Once they look at your feasibility survey and then decide that you're worth a site selection visit, they are going to call or email you to do a site selection visit. Now, they might do this over the phone, increasingly so. I've been seeing more site selection visits, but still the majority of the time they're going to come out to your site and physically meet with you and the PI and physically tour your site, your clinic. Okay, so make sure you're checking your emails, and make sure that you are checking your voicemails. Make sure you have a voicemail, and make sure you're getting back to these people quickly, because oftentimes these CRAs are reaching out to you to schedule site selection visits, and you're not the only site that they're reaching out to. So oftentimes they're reaching out to a dozen sites, and first come, first serve, right? So you want to be on top of it. Emails, calls, and you get an email, you call them back right away, or you get a phone call, answer it right away, set up your site selection visit. The earlier the better. Don't let them go see 10 sites before they come see you and you're the 11th. Try to be the first or the second, right? Because sometimes, let's say they have 12 site selection visits to do, and they see the first 10 and they're actually happy with the first 10, they may not go look at the other 2. And you don't want to be on that. So you want to be on the front end of site selection visit schedules. After the SSV, you should get a letter. And again, it varies on how quickly after the SSV you're going to get a site selection letter. So they're either going to let you know that you've got awarded the study, or you did not get the study awarded. You're going to know one way or another, but when is the key, right? And it ranges. I've had cases where I never heard back after site selection visits. I've had cases where I heard the day of that we're selected. Those are usually when the sponsors really need sites on board, and usually that's typically when you're an add-on site rather than a new site on a new study. So you can be added on to a existing study, or you can be a new site on a brand new study. That usually takes longer for you to get started, as opposed to being an add-on site. So the add-on site or the new site for new study, those are the only variables there. Add-on versus new. You should hear anywhere from the day of till never, or typically within a month or 2 you should hear back. This is when you need to follow up as well. Some people say you shouldn't follow up here because you're just annoying them. I think my strategy is simple. I want to know one way or another. Like, if I don't get the study, I don't want to be guessing. I want to know, okay, I didn't get the study, it's time to move on. Or, I got the study, let's prepare, right? Because this way you'll know whether you should take on new studies for the same indication. And I'm always, and I recommend you do the same, always take on more studies than you think you can manage, because in this day and age of risk-based monitoring, studies end before they're scheduled to end. What that means is they do real-time data analysis. If the drug is not showing efficacy, or the safety of the IP is in question, the sponsor is going to stop the study. Happens half the time these days, right? So you may only want to do one schizophrenia study, and therefore you may start denying all the future schizophrenia studies that you're getting. If you've been selected for one schizophrenia study, I think that's a bad idea, because what do you do? Number one, if you're not selected, sometimes they can select you. It's rare, but it happens. Sometimes they can select you, and then they can actually tell you a couple months later, hey, you're actually not selected. We redid the study design, and we actually don't need as many sites as we thought. It happened to me 2 weeks ago, or actually last week. Happened to me last week on a study. We were awarded a study. We were negotiating the contract and budget, and then when we sent the budget to negotiate, the sponsor said, "Oh, actually, we're not going to have you on. We're really sorry." We asked why, and they said that they redid the study design and they don't think they need as many sites anymore. So imagine if we stopped taking on more studies just because we figured we had one in the bag. Big mistake. So don't do that. I'm looking out for your best interest as a site when I tell you take on more studies than you think you can take. You can always control recruitment. If you're overworked, you don't need to enroll in certain studies, but just have them in the bag, in your back pocket. Okay, now you still want to, if you take on any study, you at least want to randomize one patient. So don't take on a study and not randomize anyone, because they're probably not going to work with you in the future. So that's just one caveat there. But always take on more studies than you think. Okay, so that's site selection visit. Now comes the contract and budget. And again, we've done entire webinars on this. Contract and budget and the startup regulatory. So when you're a startup research clinic, when you're a mature clinic, you probably have somebody else doing the contract and budget and somebody else doing the startup regulatory. When you're a startup clinic, most likely it's going to be you, the owner, the site director, just because you don't have other staff to do that. So it's going to be you. So these things are very important. Contract and budget negotiations. Please negotiate. Again, this is another thing that DSCS will do for you. It's part of our services. We will negotiate your contract and budget for you. One contract and budget that we negotiate for you pays for our service, more than pays for our services for an entire year. So if you're a client of ours, you need to take advantage of this. We offer this. It's part of the service, $1,000 a month for everything. It includes this. Okay. If you're not a client of ours, I highly recommend you consider it, or in either case, I highly recommend you negotiate your contracts and budgets. Never just accept what you're given. You're going to get every excuse thrown back at you by the sponsor of fair market value, Sunshine Act, blah, blah, blah. Okay, you can negotiate. There's sites that are tripling their budgets. All right? So make sure you're negotiating your budget. Startup and make sure you're doing this within 1 to 2 weeks. They're always going to ask you how quickly can you turn around your negotiation of a contract or budget. 1 to 2 weeks. Same thing with startup regulatory. 1 to 2 weeks. Okay, so they're going to send you a regulatory packet of 1572, financial disclosure forms, IRB questionnaire, delegation log. You should have all these things set up prior to your site initiation visit. But those are the main, what's called essential documents for a study. So you'll get a startup regulatory package. Make sure you do it. Make sure you get every sub-I to sign off on what they need to sign off on. Make sure you get the PI to sign off on what they need to sign off on. Make sure that you send in your initial IRB report to them so that they can approve your site. Sometimes that will hold you back from having a site initiation visit, and that means that you got to wait longer to start screening, which means you got to wait longer to get revenue, which means you got to wait longer to get paid. So I know it's a cliche, but time is really money here. So make sure you do all those documents in the startup regulatory package. It sounds easy, and it is. It's not difficult. The hardest part is getting all the sub-Is to sign the papers when they're hard to get a hold of sometimes. Okay, so make sure you do that. The next thing will be your site initiation visit. So prior to this, you should have your regulatory binder, your lab kits, and maybe your investigational product shipped to your site. So right after you do the contract and budget, they'll start shipping you those things. You want to have these in place prior to your SIV. Any trainings that you need to do, like ECG trainings, which are really simple, you go online and do a little training. EDC training takes like an hour to do. No matter how many you've done, every study is going to have you do another one unless you're using one of the big EDCs where they still have your training on file. Sometimes GCP, sometimes sponsors require you to do another GCP for their study. So those kind of things you want done prior to your SIV, and they're going to go through these things at your SIV. And I'm doing 2 SIVs next week for my CRO at 2 different sites, and I have a whole checklist of what I go through as a CRA at these SIVs. I'll do another video on that. That could be another video and webinar in and of itself. Maybe not webinar, but video for sure. So site initiation visit is when the monitor comes out, initiates your site, does a protocol training, make sure you have all your lab kits, make sure you have all your source documents, which I'm going to talk about right now. Make sure that you have all your regulatory documents in order. Make sure that you are ready. Make sure everyone has their training done. Make sure you have EDC access, IWRS access. That way you can literally, theoretically, and literally start screening patients the very next day. So, and if you can't, they're going to let you know at the SIV. And they'll let you know in their follow-up letter prior to site initiation, prior to screening subjects, these action items need to be completed. So they'll let you know whether you can start screening subjects after your SIV. Source documents, okay? That's another thing we do for our clients, and it's part no extra costs, part of our services. We'll create your source docs for you. Now, it's not difficult to do, but it could be time consuming, especially when you're juggling all these things. Because, oh, by the way, we're on number 6, source documents. But guess what? In a business, number 1, which is biz dev, number 2, getting site selection visits scheduled, and on, is still going on for other studies, or at least it needs to be. You need to constantly be doing these things, which again is a reason why our services could be valuable for you, and they are valuable for so many. I'm scratching my own itch with this service. This is something I would have killed for back when I started, and I paid 6 times more than this to consultants, and I had to convince them to do these things for me, and they would only do like half of them. So I know what we have here. I know it's a good service. I know they're creating value for you, but creating source documents is time consuming. And if you're only the only person running the show, who's doing biz dev and who's scheduling site selection visits and who's negotiating other contracts and working on other startup documents when you have source documents for another study that you need to complete? Right? So now you get it's an opportunity cost. You've got to hold off on all your other activities to create the source documents. So just keep that in mind. But source documents, there's a way to do it on your own too. You ask the sponsor if you can see screenshots of the electronic data capture system, or maybe by this point you already have EDC access. So you can go on there, and for every visit, it's going to tell you what needs to be collected. So you simply put those things on a source document, and that's your source. Okay. Follow your own SOPs as well, which is another thing. They would have already asked for your SOPs at your site selection visit. So Amy, if you see that, throw in SOPs. We did a whole webinar just on how to create your own SOPs. So just search on YouTube for that. Standard operating procedures that comes into play too. So that's source documents. After the source is created, you can start screening subjects. Okay. And this is where you probably need to start having a study coordinator. If you're running a one-man or one-woman show, it's doable. I know many people that are doing it, but you're going to have a hard time growing your business if you're doing study coordinator activities as well. Because again, if you're screening a subject or you're randomizing a subject, who is doing your biz dev? That's like a daily thing that needs to get done. It's like exercise. It's like eating well. If you miss a couple days, it becomes a habit, and then you get overweight. Same thing here. If you miss a few days of biz deving, it's not a huge deal. But if a few days turn into a few weeks, and a few weeks turn into a month, and now you lose a study because they do get canceled and they do close early, now you're really in trouble because you haven't been doing any biz dev. And it takes about 1 to 3 months of biz deving activity to get a study. Okay? So this is where having a CRC, clinical research coordinator, comes in really handy. This is where they need to start screening subjects. They need to start randomizing subjects. Of course, the PI is supervising all this, but the coordinator is the backbone of any study. They do 90% of the work. So screening the subjects, okay, and this is where your site is being graded on whether you're a red light, yellow light, or green light site. Red light site means never work with this site again from the sponsor's perspective. Yellow light means they're okay. And green light means absolutely. We're going to come to this site first when we need a new site for a study. We can negotiate. We'll let them negotiate a higher budget because we really want that site. So you don't want to be a red site. Red light means you're never going to get that study again. There's a few ways to become a red site, and you don't want to be that, a red light site. Number one is not to enroll any patients, okay? Red light. Another red light is commit fraud of some sort. Matter of fact, you're going to be red light for not just that study, but the FDA is going to eventually audit you, send you a warning letter. You'll be done with the research. Your PI won't be able to do research anymore if you're a red light site from a fraudulent perspective, okay? But more often than not, the most common red light sites are bad quality. So you enroll, let's say you're a high enrolling site, that's fine. You're green light when it comes to recruiting, but you might be red light when it comes to following the protocol. And this is where you really need an experienced coordinator who knows what they're doing to run the site and tell the PI and the sub-Is what they need to be doing, right? Or actually lead them to do it. Like take them by the hand and say, you need to do this. You need to sign off on the EDC. You need to sign these lab results. You need to tell me if this patient qualifies for the study. This is what a good coordinator does. So don't be a red light site. Follow the protocol, follow your SOPs, follow good clinical practice. This is where a CRC comes into play. If you're the owner and you're trying to learn all this, I highly recommend our CRA Academy or our Site Owner Academy or both. We have a package deal where we give you 6 months of our services and then both academies for $8,000. Or just learn on your own, but learn the hard way. I know so many people learn the hard way. I'm one who learned the hard way. Okay, like I went through the fire. I went through blood, sweat, and tears learning how to do this, and I learned the hard way. It's not fun. It was actually dangerous. I could have lost my business. My business was in danger of completely ruining its reputation at least 2 times when I started out back in 2005. We lucked out, right? Things worked out, but they could have just as easily gone the other way. So take quality into like serious consideration. Like that is, at the end of the day, that is your product. That is what you're selling. And I know everyone's concerned about getting studies and making sure that the budget pays well and then enrolling patients in the study. But don't ignore quality, because that's going to put you out of business just as quickly as you got into it. So don't ignore quality. Have a good CRC or get trained yourself on it. Okay. And then you'll have interim monitoring visits. So every 6 to 8 weeks, a monitor will come out. So Amy, that's number 8 if you're watching for the slides. Interim monitoring visit. Every 6 to 8 weeks on average, the monitor will come out. They'll do source data verification. They'll look at the EDC. They'll look at whether you're following the protocol. They'll query things. They'll look at regulatory. They'll look at training. Have there been a protocol amendment? Has everyone been trained, retrained on the new protocol? Are you guys using the new informed consent when the informed consents are amended? Okay, these are what goes on at interim monitoring visits, and your relationship with your CRA is critical. Okay, and it's a matter of luck too. You get some CRAs that are just so stressed out that they don't have patience to work with you, and then you have others that are just fantastic, very patient, willing to work with you, resolve your issues. I've had both. I've had the entire spectrum, and I've had some that were just no other way to put it, out to get me. And those are rare, but they are there. So IMVs, try to set up a good relationship with your CRA. I've made videos for what you should do when your CRA is difficult to work with. Okay, there's a couple videos I did on YouTube about that. We should probably do another webinar just on that. So that's interim monitoring visits. Then you'll have database locks. So that's number 9, Amy, database locks. That's when the sponsors and the monitors are freaking out. They want all data up until that point to have been source data verified. They want all queries answered and locked. So during database lock weeks, you are probably going to be getting numerous queries and numerous phone calls from your CRAs telling you to answer those queries so that they can freeze or lock the EDC. Make sure you do that. Number 10 is going to be the closeout visit. So this will happen when all data has been SDV'd. They'll come out to your site. We're having one in 2 weeks from now at our site here at Global Clinical Trials. They come get all their IP back. You send a closeout report to your IRB. The IRB now considers your site closed for the study, and they do a lot of housekeeping stuff, the CRA being they, when they come over to do the closeout visit. Now, and then the process repeats, because now your study's over, right? In between, you can invoice the sponsor for certain things. Like some contracts you invoice for screen failures. Other contracts, the screen failures get paid automatically. Regular study visits get paid automatically. Usually source data verified EDC visit will trigger a payment. Now screen fails, sometimes you have to invoice for them. Transportation, any invoiceable costs, you have to obviously invoice, and that'll be in your contract. Every contract's different, so make sure you're negotiating. Make sure you know what you're doing when you negotiate. We have 2 or 3 webinars on this topic alone. So that's it in a nutshell. Then the process repeats, and then hopefully your site is growing and adding more staff, and there's a whole nother component of site training on here, and including more physicians into your practice and with your research clinic, and that's how you gain market share, and that's how you get more studies. That's how you expand. But this is pretty much it, the study process in a nutshell. So join us for the webinar March 27th, and hope you enjoy. Take care.